Timber Talks is brought to you by Wood Solutions. Stay up to date with the latest in timber, the building material that is strong, safe and sustainable. Here is your host, Adam Jones.
Architecture using timber can improve our mental well-being and sequester carbon within our buildings. Modi von Stendahl is an architect with white architecture in Sweden and teaches at Lund University. In this episode, we discuss the concept of using architecture as medicine to heal our mental health and also the opportunities for using timber to sequester carbon to mitigate the effects of climate change. Modi von is full of passion and excitement when it comes to using architecture for biophilic design and sustainability. So without any further ado, we'll get into the interview with Modi von.
I'm graduate from the Polytechnic School of Architecture of Switzerland, Lausanne. So I'm a Swiss architect, and I've been working at white architecture for more than 10 years. Right now, since more than a year, I'm head of business development in Canada, working to implement white in Canada. And I'm also an industrial PhD student at Lund University in Sweden.
Fantastic. And one of the things you're really interested in at white architecture and yourself personally is moving toward zero carbon buildings. What are your thoughts on what the definition is of a zero carbon building, and are we doing this accurately or giving it enough thought?
Well, for many years, more than 20 years, we've been very much focusing on energy with LEED and green building and many others key players, and we had managed now to make buildings that we really reduce the energy consumption, and we can balance this consumption with green energy. So we had mastered that. We can apply it. It's just a question that doing it, and we are starting now to coming to carbon. And it's the next step, and it's very exciting, but it's new, and there is no today international carbon definition. There is Alliance, some different countries are part of it, so we are working on that. Well, it's very important that we do define carbon definition, especially that thinking of projects now that are that we publish or communicate, and we say it's a carbon zero, and we don't know what it means. Carbon zero, nobody knows. So we need it to as soon as possible have a definition that we can rely on and work with.
You mentioned about operational carbon, and now we're moving toward embodied carbon. Can you talk about what embodied carbon is and how it might be different to what sequestration or biogenic carbon is? Because for a lot of people might not understand the difference between the two.
Yeah, and it's normal. It's complicated to understand, and we don't really talk about it. It's new, and there is not so many countries that have definition. Norway was the first one to came with a definition that. So the operational carbon, it's quite simple. It's based on your energy, and then you use equivalence factor, and then it's related to your source of energy. And then you take the next step when you come to embodied carbon, and you can also, depending on the country, you can also only look at the embodied carbon. But you have to make sure that you have managed your operational carbon. So embodied carbon, it's about when you create the material. So it's about when you take the wood and then it becomes a piece of it becomes a materials, and then you calculate its life cycle assessment from when it becomes a material to the end of its life. And then you have something else that is called biogenic carbon, and this is the natural materials as wood that when they are growing they are sequestering carbon. So in Sweden we call it negative carbon. There is country that they use positive, because when we talk about energy we talk about positive, so it's confusing. And today in the international regulation you're not allowed to consider this biogenic carbon in your embodied carbon definition.
Why is that, and is it a complex equation in including this biogenic carbon inside our timber building and the carbon dioxide that's actually stored within the building?
So we don't know how to do it, as when we started 20 years ago with energy. So I think it's about sitting all together, key people, and look at it. More specifically, the biogenic carbon, if you want to take it into the equation, you need also to look at the big picture. If it's about wood and the trees, you also have to make sure that the country have a good policy about the management of the forest. If you take trees from the forest, you need to put at least one back, maybe two. Apparently it's 3 here in Quebec. I found out yesterday, because when you make your assumption, you need to have an idea of what you take from the forest, what is put back. So this is one aspect. And the other thing is also you need to consider the time that you look at the life cycle assessment we use in the energy to look at it, or about 60 years, I think. And then so it's often about 50 years that we look at it. So to consider the sequestration, the biogenic carbon, you need to look at the life cycle for 100 years. And the reason is because the trees, at least in Sweden, yesterday I got other information that would rise, but in Sweden we calculate that it takes between 65 to 75 years to grow back again. And then the third aspect also, it's you need to know what you're going to do with this material at the end of its life. You need to have a strategy, because if you're going to burn it, then you release again the CO2. So we need to, and this is something that we will not be defined overnight. It's also, there is many different solutions. If we retrofit the wood, if we make furniture with it, or if it becomes biomass and then we make biochar. So it's kind of a complex question and main aspect that needs to be defined and taken care of.
So it's important for us to start thinking for the end of life in our designs at the moment.
Yeah. Yesterday was a good talk from our partner Mattinson, Daniel, and he presented not a sexy project at all, and he got a lot of question and interest, and it was about retrofitting existing building, and doesn't matter if they're in concrete or in metal. If they're there, it makes more sense to improve them, adding more living space than taking it away.
Yeah, and it's one of the benefits of building extensions as well, which is something that's happening around the world, because you're building on top of existing buildings and you're not destroying them, but then you're also using timber to build on top because it's lightweight and again storing more carbon. So move on to Wellbeing now. Yesterday in your presentation you were speaking about the potential of using architecture as medicine and improving well-being. Can you talk a little bit about what this is all about?
It's been research for more than 30 years about it. One of the person that many people knows, his name is Roger Ulrich. I think it's an American scientific researcher that now lives in Sweden. Yeah. And he had, for more than 30 years, made research about evidence-based design and how that can, physical aspect can help to feel better and the healing process. So there is 4 aspects that it's been studied about physical. This is also the sensory, but if we stay in the physical, it's about nature, contact with the nature, fresh air, daylight, and silence. And it's very difficult to scientifically prove it because you need to measure. But we had worked with that in psychiatric project because it's in a way it's a good a place to see if you do heal better. And we had measure after the project that with applying an approach of contact with nature and daylight and silence, that people do feel better. That's in this specific project, but we didn't have any sample to compare with. But in this project, we did show that people were staying a shorter time, and it was less aggressivity when they were there. And it also for the employees who were working at the hospital, that there was less sick leave. Probably for the reason that it was a better milieu, a place to work, but also if the patient were less aggressive and maybe easier to handle.
Yeah. Do you think there's a link there between these elements and what we evolved as a species to be around and just being closer with nature. Is this the connection?
Yes, it is. For years, it's been called intuition because as a human, everybody knows that if you look from your window and then you see nature instead of another building, you do feel better. Then how you can measure and prove it, it's another question. It doesn't mean we cannot wait to have that to do promote and work that way. So for years we had believed and had the intuition and work with intuition and evidence-based design on that. And today, as I presented yesterday, there is proof internationally that show that being in the nature and in the forest, you do feel better. Yesterday was 3 important aspects that were presented. It was that you do feel more relaxed and calm in the forest. And being in the forest 3 days a month, apparently then extend this feeling. And then the other one was they had measured the cortisol level. That is a stress hormone. And it was also showing that being in the forest compared to the city. And the last one was a part of the brain, amygdala, that shows that is more active when you're in the city. And they don't know for sure, but they think this is the part of the brain that make you have depression. It's related.
So yeah, that's a really big deal, that reduction in cortisol compared to being in the forest and being close to nature.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a link also with exposed timber surfaces and this, again, intuitively obvious that it actually reduces cortisol levels as well?
I did read about the smell of the wood, of the nature, that do have an effect. But definitely, I'm very convinced that being close to natural materials do make you feel better. And then the question is also how you interpret those research from nature, and then you bring it to the city and to the architecture.
So what role do architects play in our well-being going forward, do you think?
I mean, it's a major role that architects do consider those aspects at feeling better and do make choice with people in the center. So, I mean, aesthetic, it's important, but it's even more important that people feel better in the architecture.
It's my general question I normally close with. What do you see as the future of timber construction in light of what we've been talking about, carbon sequestration and well-being?
I think wood, a natural material, do for sure help you to feel psychologically better and physically, and they also have the power to heal the planet with sequestering carbon when it's growing and then being stuck in the architecture. So I really see that as a very strong material in many ways for us, for as a human and for the planet.
Yeah. In that interview, Marie-France was talking about using architecture as medicine and biophilic design. So there was research commissioned by Forest and Wood Products Australia and taken out by Pollinate to really show how wood can be used to improve overall well-being within office buildings. If you want to check it out, I've got the link in the show notes, or you can go to woodsolutions.com.au/wood at work.